is everybody doing on this fine Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon? I guess by now I am Colin Bashable, your host here. Every week around here is going to look a little bit different, just depending on my schedule. I don't do this for a living. Now, if you guys were to support me and were to like this video or subscribe to this channel, it gets me a step closer to being able to live my dream for the rest of my life. But until I'm getting paid for this, right? I got to be able to work around things, have a life outside of this. So this isn't exactly work. So every week's going to look a little bit different. A lot of the instant reactions are on TikTok. Some weeks you'll see some on YouTube. Some weeks you just won't. I'll do it when I can, but when I can't, then I'll make sure I'm doing it over on TikTok no matter where I'm at. All right, we're going to talk about each Power 4 conference and what we kind of learned from the week of games. And we're going to go straight into it with the ACC. The story coming out of the ACC is there is truly not a contender outside of Miami. At the end of the day, when you watch all the games yesterday, and going back to last week with Florida State, you saw Florida State lose to an underdog Georgia Tech. Even though you saw Georgia Tech have a little bit of iffiness, by the way, yesterday against Georgia State, they were fine. I'm just pointing that out there. SMU struggled at Nevada. Virginia, not looking great, right? California, not looking amazing. Syracuse, their defense needs a whole lot of help. Pittsburgh, Eli Holstein, they look good, but Eli Holstein has to be able to be consistent. I thought in that game he was very inconsistent against Kent State. Vanderbilt beats Virginia Tech in overtime, probably the worst team in the SEC, beating who was supposed to be one of your top sleepers in the ACC. Clemson getting thrashed, one of your top teams going up against the top team in the SEC, presumably. So, and then when you go to like the weekday games, North Carolina, they looked pretty poor, and Max Johnson, their starter, is out. NC State struggled for the most part against Western Carolina until they pulled away in the fourth quarter. Wake Forest had to pull away from NCAA in the second half, an NCAA team that went 1-10 a year ago. Duke, they really couldn't get the run game going and that O-line going against Elon. Stanford losing at home against TCU in a good game. There is no true contender. The only teams that really lived up to expectation or surpassed expectation was Miami going to the Swamp and dominating Florida. Cam Ward looked absolutely outstanding. They looked like they had not only a good, solid run game, but they also had a running back by committee thing, which I thought it was going to be a Damian Martinez getting the bulk of the carries thing. Nope. It was a running back by committee thing. They were dominant. And in Louisville, we'll see what happens when they play somebody that's better than Austin Peay. But Louisville looked really good in their 62-0 shutout victory over Austin Peay. The ACC right now looks like a disaster, like a mess, that Miami is the team that could potentially save the ACC from that mess. We'll see if some of these other teams will have bounce backs or develop. I'm watching out for NC State to get better through the course of the year. Virginia Tech, complete flop. I was high on them. I thought they would make the ACC championship. No, they're not making the ACC championship. The way that defense played, the way that offense was inconsistent, how Kyron Drones specifically was inconsistent, they're not doing anything. Florida State will see tomorrow night, see if they can bounce back from their loss. I still really like Georgia Tech. Think that they're probably the third most impressive team we saw in the ACC behind Louisville and Miami. And I am not high on Louisville, by the way, and I'm not completely going to change my tune on them. But I was rather impressed with Louisville against Austin Peay. It's against Austin Peay, but I was impressed. I thought that their receivers played really well and their defense played really well. Going to the Big 12, we're going to shift gears. This is a new look conference. How do they look in their first week of action? Well, you start with Thursday night's action, where though UCF was dominant, KJ Jefferson was amazingly underwhelming. though that run game was not. RJ Harvey really got going in that ball game. He's going to be a player to watch out for. Kansas and Utah, they took care of business. They looked really good, looked like two of the favorites in this conference. Colorado surviving against North Dakota State. I had defended Colorado. I still will. But when you compare what Oklahoma State did to South Dakota State to what Colorado was able to do to North Dakota State, you get a little bit of alarm bells about the Colorado Buffaloes there. On Friday night, TCU going on the road and getting a tough victory against Stanford, really icing it away at the end of the game with a touchdown. I thought that TCU looked solid at times, started out very rough, was very undisciplined on defense early on, but they got their crap together. Then we go to Saturday, West Virginia getting annihilated. I personally feel like that said more about Penn State than it did about West Virginia. I think Penn State is a lot better than I gave them credit for and a lot better than what a lot of people gave them credit for. And I do feel like West Virginia was a little bit disappointing. But for the most part, when you get that type of buzzsaw matchup that you got, where Penn State, their defense had something to prove and their offense was super creative and unlike anything you had seen from a Penn State offense, your preparation couldn't be there. I think West Virginia is going to be fine off of this loss. Oklahoma State, a controlling victory over South Dakota State where Alan Bowman really looked good. And I was expecting for South Dakota State to really make Alan Bowman look a little bit shaky. A big, good start for the, 20th year senior. I don't even know how many years he's up to at this point. Cincinnati against Towson was a little bit shaky for Cincinnati, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You'd expect it to look better, but you got good play out of your quarterback, Brendan Sorsby, and that was the biggest question about the Cincinnati team going into the year. Iowa State looking a little shaky against North Dakota. I almost said North Dakota State. I thought Rocco Beck played really good, but I was very discouraged with how Abu Sama could not get the ball moving on the ground for this Iowa State team. Kansas State, 41-6. Exactly what you would expect from Kansas State. They dominated in this game. They ran the ball very well to the tune of 9.1 yards per carry, using Avery Johnson on the ground a couple of times. It was through the air where Avery Johnson was a little bit underwhelming, but he had good moments and he had bad ones. Baylor, dominant over Tarleton State. Daquan Finn looked really good for this squad, and I thought the run game was solid but not amazing in that ball game. But yeah, Daquan Finn throwing the ball looked really good. Houston, by the way, got absolutely embarrassed, ran through against UNLV, and they ran the ball right down Houston's throat, and they also shut down Houston's offense. We'll see what Willie Fritz does. He made a quarterback switch at the end of the game. We'll see if that's like a long-term thing, because the man who came in was Uwe Ailey, and I thought Ailey looked a whole lot better in this game than Donovan Smith did. Texas Tech had to survive in overtime against Abilene Christian. That offense is electric, but that defense is nothing special. I really liked what Byron Morton was able to do. I liked what Taj Brooks was able to do, and that receiving core was really good as well, but this defense could not stop a nosebleed. They allowed for McIver, the quarterback for Abilene Christian, to throw for 500 yards. That's abysmal. They were a 2-point conversion away from losing this ball game. And they survive, but this is alarming for Texas Tech. BYU wins 41-13 in a more impressive showing than I was really expecting. And they ended up going with another quarterback, not named Gary Bohannon, in this game, and looking good with Jake Ratzlaff in the game. And did I say that right? Retzlaff in the game. I watched that game a decent amount, but it wasn't, I had the audio off with that game, so I didn't hear his name pronunciation there. Anyway, Arizona's defense also looked very suspect. Devin Dampier looked really good for New Mexico, and they ran the ball very, very well. You had Eli Sanders stifled, but it was specifically Devin Dampier who was able to run the ball for the tune of 130 yards and throw the ball for 260. That defense needs to correct it, but I like what I see from New Mexico's offense early. Hopefully we can see some good play out of them in the Mountain West this year. And then finally, the nightcap, Arizona State. How about them, man? Arizona State came out with Sam Leavitt as the starting quarterback. They ran the ball rather effectively. Carlos Brooks had a lot of really good moments in this game, but Sam Leva took care of the ball, and that defense stifled the Wyoming offensive attack. 1.3 yards per carry, 3.9 yards per pass. Great job by Arizona State. So what did I learn about the Big 12? Well, I don't know exactly much about the top contenders because the top contenders, they didn't exactly showcase against bad opponents. That's why that they are going to be like legit national contenders for making a run in the college football playoff. I think, though, that it is very clear that some of these teams are going to be pretenders, like a Texas Tech, like an Arizona specifically, like that. The 39 points that they allowed, the struggle that their defense showed, that's alarming to me. Any mobile quarterbacks, and Avery Johnson is a bad matchup. Garrett Green, a bad matchup here for Arizona. UCF looking very vulnerable. A lot of people high on them too. Basically, to me, it's like you look at Kansas State, Utah, Kansas as likely the top contenders in the conference. It will probably be – and Oklahoma State. I forgot about Oklahoma State. Two of those four teams, I believe, is going to make the conference championship if I'm judging it based on week one. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Utah. Two of those four teams are going to be the Big 12 championship matchup. Big Ten reaction. Let's talk about this because the Big Ten did not look good on Saturday, not at all. You start with Thursday night. Rutgers pulls away from Howard. Kyle Monaghan is an absolute freak there. Minnesota losing at home against North Carolina. That one's going to sting off of two missed field goals. Breaking in Max Brosmer. I think Max Brosmer is an upgrade, even though Ethan Kaliakmanis looked solid in his opener. It was against Howard. I thought Max Brosmer, as he eased into the game in the second half, looked a whole lot better and like an upgrade from Ethan Kaliakmanis a year ago. Eastern Illinois had no chance against Illinois. Illinois looked really good. Luke Altmaier finding his guy Pat Bryant a couple of times. I think that Illinois might be a little bit of a sneaky team this year. And then a couple of struggles on Friday night. Michigan State struggling against FAU 16-10. Aiden Childs did not look very good. They do not look like they have skill position talent there. I was very impressed, though, with Ron Lynch Adams. Curious to see what the UMass transfer does for the rest of the year. Wisconsin, 28-14. Look, they didn't have a ton of possessions. I think this offense is going to progress to get better throughout the year, but they're going to have to put in a lot of work to be ready for Alabama in a couple of weeks. Then you get to Saturday. You saw Penn State dominate West Virginia. To me, that was the most impressive performance in the conference on Saturday. I think that Penn State is going to be a legit contender to win this conference this year. When you look at their schedule, if they could easily end up 11-1. I was not super high on them at the beginning of the year, but they could easily end up 11-1 and in that conference championship, or even 12-0. They get Ohio State at home. Iowa looked really good, too. I mean, their offense wasn't the most explosive thing in the world, but they found a couple of explosive plays. Caleb Johnson had a nice run. Cade McNamara looked pretty good slinging the rock, but it's Illinois State there. I thought Maryland was surprisingly impressive. I was very impressed with their ability to run the football against a UConn team that I don't think is very bad whatsoever, especially on defense. Billy Edwards, he looked good, a very stable hand at the quarterback position, a lot better than I was expecting. Nolan Ray, Roman Hemby both also had moments in this ball game that looked really good. Purdue also looked really good, by the way. Now, they beat a very bad Indiana State team, but when you look at what Hudson Card was able to do, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, he also ran around a little bit. Devin Mockabee looked good. Elijah Jackson looked good. You had the power back and Reggie Love. That dynamic there is awesome. And they have a lot of good speed and good receivers on the outside. I'll be interested to watch Purdue this year. Indiana was a little bit underwhelming. Not very impressive to me, but they were able to get it done against FIU 31-7. Nebraska beats UTEP in a game where I thought Dylan Raiola looked pretty solid, and the run game looked solid. They pulled away from UTEP pretty quickly in that one. A defensive slugfest against one of the best G5 teams in America. Northwestern beats Miami, Ohio off of a Mike Wright touchdown late in that game to pull them ahead to win 13-6. I like what this defense was able to do, containing Brett Gabbert in this Miami offense, and they could not run the ball. Miami couldn't. They tried to, and they only ran to the tune of 1.7 yards per carry. Oregon struggling against Idaho. That was just a weird game. A lot of misreads and I don't even know what to say about this. Like, this was a weird game. They put up numbers, they moved the ball, they dominated in that aspect, but yet they couldn't put the ball in the end zone. They couldn't even put the ball between the field goal posts. Had a missed field goal, turnover on downs, a fumble. They struggled to just finish drives, and they took a long time on their drives. That's what kept Idaho in this game. Then you had Michigan outlasting Fresno State. Fresno State closed it to 6 points in the fourth quarter, and then Michigan pounded the rock. And guess what? Running back one is Kalel Mullings. I told everybody over on TikTok all offseason, not high on Donovan Edwards. I don't know why you guys can't learn that Donovan Edwards is not their guy. All right, he ended up making his stats a little bit better. He still ran for 27 yards. He accounted for only 27 yards between receiving and rushing. He was not very good in this ball game. UCLA, they had to come back to beat Hawaii, but they did it. Brady Shager, they adjusted UCLA's defense, and Brady Shager struggled a good bit in that second half, and obviously they couldn't run the ball. I feel like Hawaii is very much missing Stephen McBride right now. They need that top target back. They would have won that game if McBride was here. I'm not impressed with UCLA. To me, them or Michigan State are the worst team in the conference. Washington, late at night, they looked all right. You saw some good stuff out of Will Rogers. You saw some good stuff out of Jonah Coleman in that run game. Not overly impressed with Washington, but I do believe that they're going to make a bowl game after watching them play there. And then we're going to try to go by this quick because there weren't a ton of SEC games that were very meaningful. So let's come here starting with Thursday night. Arkansas dominates Arkansas Pine Bluff. I'm not that impressed with Arkansas. I thought they were just kind of like running the score up at the end of the half, but at the end of the day, still a good win. Missouri looked really good too, but again, Murray State. Oklahoma, you like to see Jackson Arnold get going. It's clear to me that Javante Barnes is a better running back than Gavin Sawchuk. Like a lot of people had said, Sawchuk was the better of the two. 51-3 over Temple, though. Very impressive. Georgia, very impressive against Clemson. They pulled away against that defense. They made halftime adjustments and outscored them 28-3 in the second half after a 6-0 first half. Vanderbilt, look, a lot of resilience after Virginia Tech came back to take the lead. The resilience of Diego Pavia to lead his team down the field, to tie the game up, lead his team down the field, to put him in position for a game-winning field goal. They didn't score the game-winning field goal. All right, let's go to overtime. I'll score a touchdown here. Diego Pavia looks really good, and he pulled off that upset against Auburn a year ago. Hopefully Vanderbilt can be a little bit of a feisty team and a dangerous team in the SEC this year. Tennessee looked amazing to me. I thought their wide receivers gelled well with Nico Yamalava, and that offensive line is really good. Lance Hurd, that addition from LSU, really, really good. Texas looked like one of the best teams in America. Colorado State's not a bad team, and they shut them out. They shut them down. Braden Valor, Nicolosi had nowhere to go. Torrey Horton got a couple of good plays, but outside of a couple of good plays, got shut down. And that offense looked really good, and it was exciting to see Arch Manning get onto the field there. Miami, 41-17 over Florida. Florida, Billy Napier, be patient with him. That's all I got to say. South Carolina struggled against Old Dominion. Old Dominion, a little bit of a feisty team. I think they're going to be dangerous in the Sun Belt. But South Carolina, you would expect a whole lot more from that offense. Hopefully Lenora Sellers takes off from here after that game-winning touchdown. I thought Mississippi State looked pretty solid against Eastern Kentucky, but it is Eastern Kentucky. Alabama ran away from Western Kentucky. TJ Finley was the wrong call. I think they're probably going to go with Caden Veltkamp going forward or pretty soon. We'll see how that goes for Western Kentucky, but Alabama didn't look like much of a drop-off to me. Ole Miss, 76-0 over Furman. Very exciting game for Jackson Dart and Trey Harris. I thought they looked really good throwing the football. Texas A&M getting beat at home. Connor Wakeman looked absolutely pitiful. That defense, though, that defense looked really good for Texas A&M. Definitely something to hang your hat on, but this is a bad look for week one for Mike Elko's team. Auburn dominates to Alabama A&M 73-3. If you looked at this game, you looked at the box score, you would have been impressed with Peyton Thorne and how he was able to throw the ball, and relatively impressed with how they were able to run the ball. Jarquez Hunter didn't get the ball much, but his impact was felt. And then Kentucky 31-0 over Southern Miss. A little bit of a shaky start for Brock Vandegrift in this game, but he kind of got it going. And surprisingly, Demi Sume Carnabe was really the bell-tail back, and you didn't see any, and I don't know if he was hurt or whatever, but you didn't see any of Chip Trayanum for the Kentucky Wildcats. The North Texas transfer, Jamori Macklin, by the way, he looked pretty solid. Performance of the day goes to Ashton Jeanty, who had 6 touchdowns on the ground and 269 yards on 20 carries. I thought he was really good, and he was really the reason why the Boise State Broncos were able to fend off the Georgia Southern Eagles. But their defense struggled. Hopefully that's a one-off right there. Otherwise, they're not going to make it to a New Year's Six, or sorry, a college football playoff bid. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like the video if you made it this far, and I'll see you guys in the